The court jester's role beyond laughter. He was dressed in colors that defied convention: reds, greens, yellows. Bells at his cap, mismatched shoes, a fool's scepter in his hand. He entered the royal hall not with reverence, but with a grin. While lords bowed and ladies curtsied, the jester danced, tumbled, and teased. To the eye, he was a fool. But appearances are deceiving. The court jester was no simple entertainer. He was a voice in the room no one else dared to be. Today, we journey into the world of the jester, to uncover his duties, his dangers, his power, and the subtle brilliance behind the laughter. The medieval and early modern courts were places of strict hierarchy. Everything had order, from the seating at banquets to the colors one could wear. Power radiated from the king, and all else followed in rank. And yet, in this rigid world, there was one figure permitted to stand apart. The jester. His role was to amuse, yes, to juggle, joke, mimic and provoke laughter. But laughter was only the surface. Beneath it was something deeper. Jesters held a unique license to speak truth to power. While a noble could lose his head for mocking the king, the jester could do so with impunity. His jest made sharp truths easier to swallow. Wrapped in humor, even criticism could become entertainment. But this role was dangerous. A misjudged joke, an ill-timed barb, these could cost a jester his post, his place, or his life. The jester walked a tightrope. Make the king laugh, but not at the wrong time. Reveal the truth, but not too harshly. Use wit as a shield and a sword. Jesters were often deeply intelligent. They needed quick minds, sharp tongues, and social awareness. Many could read and write. Some were trained in rhetoric. Others were musicians, poets, even philosophers. They came from many walks of life. Some were former clerics. Some were people with disabilities. Others were simply clever commoners. A jester's origin mattered less than his talent. He was expected to entertain in countless ways: singing, storytelling, acrobatics, mimicry, wordplay. But his most delicate work was verbal fencing. He must observe the court, its tensions, ambitions, rivalries, and weave commentary into comedy. In this, the jester became a kind of political weathervane. His jokes reflected the mood of the realm. If food was scarce, he might poke fun at empty royal platters. If taxes were high, he might dress as a beggar and ask the king for coin. Through performance, he made space for discomfort. Kings understood this. Wise monarchs valued their jesters not just for entertainment, but for insight. A good jester kept his ruler grounded. He could offer critique no advisor dared give. He could relieve courtly tension with a single quip. Some jesters became legends. Will Somers served King Henry VIII and was one of the few permitted to speak freely even as the king's temper grew fearsome. Archibald Armstrong was jester to King James I and built a fortune from his position. Tribolet, the French jester, was said to be so valued by King Francis I that he once earned a pardon for insulting a noble, simply by crafting a better insult. These were not clowns in the modern sense. They were intermediaries. Court mirrors. Satirists with permission to jest at the crown itself. But what happened when a jester overstepped? What were the boundaries? The answer was vague. That was the peril. Each court had its mood, each ruler his temperament. Some monarchs welcomed barbed wit. Others preferred soft flattery. A joke told one day might be applauded, and condemned the next. Jesters learned to read the room with great care. Their survival depended on it. And yet, many chose the role. Why? Because it offered what few positions could: freedom of speech. In an age of rigid roles, the jester danced between them. He could mock a general, tease a bishop, question a decision. All within the bounds of comedy. This gave him a strange form of power. The jester had no army, no land, no title. But he could sway opinion, plant ideas, and even alter decisions, if he struck the right chord. He could shame the proud. Humanize the distant. Remind the powerful that they, too, were mortal. He could bring the room to laughter, or to silence. And when a court laughed at itself, even for a moment, something shifted. The jester's work was done. But not all jesters were confined to castles. There were traveling fools, festival jesters, public performers who brought satire to the streets. They mocked officials, mimicked priests, recited political verse. Sometimes, they were arrested. Sometimes, they were hailed as heroes. These performers kept the tradition alive even as court jesters faded. For by the 17th and 18th centuries, the age of jesters waned. Absolutist monarchies tightened control. The professionalization of theatre offered new outlets for satire. The jester, as court fixture, vanished. But the role never truly disappeared. We find echoes of the jester today in comedians, late-night hosts, political cartoonists, even internet satirists. Those who make us laugh while making us think. Those who expose absurdity through humor. The bells are gone. The motley suit retired. But the voice remains. Witty, watchful, willing to say what others will not. So the next time you hear laughter in a place of power, listen closely. There may be more truth in the joke than in the silence that follows. Thank you for listening. If this story brought the past to life for you, consider subscribing. And let the echoes of history continue to speak, even through a fool's smile. The tax collector's long road. He rides alone. Cloak heavy with dust, boots crusted from miles of country roads. In one hand, a leather satchel. In the other, papers bearing the king's seal. He is not a noble. Not a soldier. Not a merchant. But his presence stirs unease. Doors close. Conversations quiet. Children are called indoors. He is the tax collector. And he comes not with sword or sermon, but with ink and demand. To understand the tax collector of the 1600s, we must first understand his world. This is an age of monarchy and religion, of debt and empire. Wars are frequent. Infrastructure is fragile. Royal courts grow ever larger. And all of it must be paid for. Across Europe, kingdoms expand their reach. But kings do not build alone. They tax. The land, the harvest, the salt, the windows, the wheelbarrows. Nothing is without a price. Enter the collector. He is the arm of the treasury. The footfall of finance. And his road is long. He wakes before dawn. His work begins in record books, ledgers, scrolls, letters of summons. He studies names, marks debts, maps his path. Villages, manors, market towns. He must visit them all. Often, he rides alone. Sometimes with a clerk. Sometimes with guards. The more unpopular he is, the more he travels in company. His arrival is rarely welcome. Even when expected. Some greet him with strained civility. Others with outright hostility. He is the face of burden. The bearer of royal will. But his task is not simple. He must negotiate. Argue. Demand. Listen. Threaten. Wait. A widow with no coin. A farmer pleading poor harvest. A miller hiding sacks of grain. All must be accounted for, and still, he must collect. In coin, in goods, in livestock if needed. The crown is not patient. The collector records everything. Tallies. Names. Debts unpaid. Promises made. His ledger is sacred. It will be checked, double-checked, and judged. But his task is not only clerical. It is political. A single mistake, a poorly chosen word, can spark riot or revolt. Especially in tense years of plague, famine, or war. The tax collector must be tactful, resilient, and above all, cautious. Because resentment follows him. In muttered curses. In veiled threats. In silent stares. Sometimes, in stones thrown after his horse. Yet for all this, he holds status. The collector often sits higher than local officials. He may dine with magistrates. Attend court. Carry letters bearing royal signature. His word holds weight. But power breeds enemies. And enemies watch for weakness. A missing coin. A bribe taken. A debtor unfairly pressed. Any scandal could see him disgraced. He must walk the line. Serve the crown. Spare the people. Obey the law. Bend it just enough. Never break it. And still, many collectors did. Some became notorious. Their greed unchecked. Their methods cruel. They imprisoned debtors. Seized property. Bankrupted entire towns. Others became legends. Known for mercy. For fairness. For returning with less than expected, but with peace intact. A few vanished. Robbed. Killed. Lost along the road. Their ledgers burned. Their records gone. Their names remembered only in rumor. There were no easy days. The job demanded everything: memory, courage, calculation, patience. A tax collector was as much actor as accountant. He must be firm but likable. Unshakable but fair. He must promise nothing, but suggest everything. He must leave a town poorer, yet avoid its hatred. And always, he moved on. The road never ended. There was always another town. Another face. Another coin to collect. He saw the best of people. Their hospitality. Their resilience. Their honesty. And the worst, their deceit, their fear, their desperation. At night, he would rest at inns, barns, sometimes in the homes of those he taxed. Not always by choice. He drank carefully. Slept lightly. Dreamed of ledgers. Some tax collectors kept journals. In them, we find more than numbers. We find confessions. Regrets. Doubts. The humanity beneath the duty. One wrote of a village too poor to pay. He took their grain. Regretted it. But recorded it nonetheless. Another told of a girl who pleaded for her father's release. He refused. And never forgot her face. The collector bore more than silver. He bore the weight of a kingdom's hunger. And the knowledge that his role, though vital, made him feared. And yet, he rode. Day after day. Village to village. Season after season. 4 years. Until he was too old. Too hated. Or too dead. Then another took up the ledger. And the long road began again. Today, tax is still with us. Still complex. Still unpopular. But behind the bureaucracy, the legacy of men like him remains. Not heroes. Not villains. Instruments of state. Shaped by duty, dulled by routine, burdened by the work of keeping a kingdom solvent. So the next time you sigh at a tax form, think of the man on the muddy road. Ledger in hand. Coins clinking at his side. And 100 miles left to go. Preparing ink and quills for writing. Before the printing press, before the fountain pen, before the keyboard, there was the quill. And ink, dark as midnight. Together, they carried thoughts from the mind to the parchment. From kingly decrees to quiet poetry. But neither came ready-made. They had to be made by hand. So let us walk slowly, carefully, through the steps of preparing ink and quills for writing. A daily ritual, centuries old. We begin with the quill. The instrument. The extension of the hand. It was not just any feather. It had to be large, strong, hollow, and resilient. A goose feather was ideal. Swans, crows, or turkeys could be used. But the goose was preferred. One did not pluck just any feather. The outer 5 flight feathers, taken from the left wing, were prized. Why the left? Because they curved away from the hand for a right-hand writer. Freshly plucked, the feather was far too soft. So it had to be cured. This process hardened the quill, made it durable, and helped it hold an edge. Curing could be done in different ways. One was to thrust the feather's barrel, that is, the hollow shaft, into hot sand or ash. The heat hardened the keratin. Too hot, and the quill would crack. Too cool, and it remained soft. Some scribes cured quills by soaking them in water, then burying them in warm dung or clay for days. Unpleasant, but effective. Once hardened, the feather was trimmed. The plume cut down to avoid distraction. Sometimes left long for flair. Other times, stripped almost bare. A matter of personal taste. Then came the cutting. A delicate operation. The barrel tip was sliced diagonally. Then the nib was shaped with a small knife, the pen knife. A vertical slit was made in the center. This helped channel ink. Then the shoulders were trimmed for flexibility. The edge sharpened to a fine point. A perfect quill was firm, yet elastic. It could glide smoothly across parchment, hold ink without dripping, and be recut many times before wearing out. It was not just a tool. It was a companion. Chosen, shaped, and maintained by the hand that used it. Now the ink. Liquid thought. Ancient. Alchemical. Essential. The most common ink in medieval and early modern Europe was iron gall ink. Its ingredients were simple. Its chemistry, complex. To make it, one needed 4 main components: gall nuts, iron salts, gum arabic, and water. Gall nuts were growths formed on oak trees. When a tiny wasp laid its egg inside a bud, the tree reacted, forming a round gall. These were harvested, crushed, and dried. Why galls? Because they contain tannic acid, astringent, potent, a key ingredient. Next came the iron. Iron sulfate, often called green vitriol or copras. It could be bought from apothecaries or extracted from iron filings soaked in vinegar. The iron and the tannic acid reacted. Together, they formed a rich, black compound. Initially pale, it darkened on exposure to air. That is why freshly written ink often looked faint, only to deepen within minutes. To stabilize this mixture, gum arabic was added. Sap from the acacia tree. It thickened the ink, made it flow smoothly, helped it adhere to parchment. All of this was mixed with water. Clean, preferably rainwater, boiled and cooled. The result was a powerful ink, one that could last for centuries on the page. But making ink was more than following a recipe. Proportions mattered. Timing mattered. Weather mattered. Ink made on humid days behaved differently from ink made in the dry. Some scribes boiled their galls for hours. Others let them steep in cold water for weeks. Some used wine instead of water. Each variation affected color, consistency, longevity. Once mixed, the ink was strained. Any sediment removed. Stored in small bottles or inkwells. Often sealed with wax or a cork. Inkwells themselves were works of art. Ceramic, glass, brass. Some portable. Others fixed to desks. Some had compartments for sand or blotting powder. Ink could be scented with cloves or myrrh, to keep insects away, or simply for pleasure. It was not permanent by accident. Iron gall ink etched slightly into the parchment. That is why it is still legible today, centuries later. But it could also be corrosive. Poorly made ink ate through paper, left holes where words once were. That was the price of power, of longevity. Now we return to the desk. Quill in hand. Ink in well. Parchment stretched. Before writing, the quill was dipped. Not too deep. Not too often. The writer tapped off excess. Then began. Each stroke required rhythm. A light touch. An even pull. Too fast, and the ink spattered. Too slow, and it pooled. When the point dulled, the quill was trimmed again. Sharpened with the penknife. Returned to duty. Sometimes a scribe carried multiple quills. Different widths for headings, body text, marginalia. Some even had a knife, a quill, and a spoon tied to their belt. Mistakes were corrected with a knife, scraping the ink from the surface of parchment, then smoothing it down, and writing again. It was a dance. Feather, ink, page, thought. This process was meditative, but it was also practical. Every letter mattered. Every drop of ink. Ink and quill were not just tools. They were bridges. From mind to page. From one century to another. With them, monks copied scripture. Scribes drafted charters. Poets scribbled verse. Explorers kept journals. They shaped how the world was remembered. And how it still is. So next time you pick up a pen, or tap a screen, think of the feather, the ink, and the careful hand behind every line. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy these quiet explorations, consider subscribing. There are many more stories to tell, and many more roads into the past.